See, it's the first time I've been brought on early to fill the space up. My reputation to talk a lot has clearly preceded me, but there we go. Good afternoon, everybody. A quick apology before I start. I had laser surgery on my eyes a couple of weeks ago, so I've gone from being very short-sighted to being slightly long-sighted, so do forgive me. I'm trying to get the Anger reading glasses, so something is bound to go wrong. Okay. Quick intro. I head up the Commercial Vehicle Incident Prevention team at National Highways, which fundamentally tries to do exactly what it says on the can. We're trying to reduce incidents involving vans and trucks on our network. I also, a little bit, two roles I suppose, also head up the Drive for Better Business campaign within National Highways, which is very much our information flow piece. So very pleased to be asked along to speak today. It's been a little bit intimidating because I've realised I'm probably the least intelligent person in the entire room, but let's see how this goes. Okay, right. Bit of a bold statement, that, but certainly my experience and a lot of the work which we're doing within highways, and I've been around the transport logistics industry for most of my working career with the trade association formerly known as Freight Transport Association. But the reality of it is when we look back at so many crash records, we find very few where the initial causation was anything at all to do with vehicle condition, yet we seem to have an obsession with the condition of the vehicle as opposed to the individuals who are driving the vehicles. And one of the great benefits of going on last at these kind of conferences, I've made a few notes that I've gone through with little bits and pieces I can pick from other people's sessions, and spookily, there does seem to be quite a common theme running through all of this lot. So let me put our cards on the table. And forgive me, I have written some notes because I want to make sure I don't miss any of the bits and pieces out. There are lots of bits of resonance, certainly with Kira's presentation, with Chief Constable Shiner's presentation early on. And one of the things I always say at these kind of events, and it is designed to be slightly controversial and get people's attention, I accept that, is I'm not really that interested in compliance. I'm really interested in risk, which is a different thing. Now, clearly risk and compliance do work hand in hand in a lot of circumstances. It's a very good lead indicator in a lot of things, but our whole activity is about risk management rather than compliance management, which is worth saying. Let me put our cards on the table. We have massively ambitious targets within National Highways to reduce the number of killed and serious injury incidents on our network massively over the next 10, 20, 30 years or so. But the fess up is that we know that we can do what we're doing now, and we won't do it. To be blunt, we know that we can do 10, 100, even 1,000 times more of what we're doing now, and we still won't hit those targets. What we need is different. And the reality of it is that different is sat in front of me, and it's sat in various times we've used this similar presentation to fleet operators and health and safety professionals within commercial organisations, procurers, because actually, and I know it's a phrase that's used way too often, way too flippantly, we're all in this together. We all have the opportunity to improve the situation, and by working together, that's where the changes will come. So, one of the things I just wanted to very quickly think about, and Joe Shine touched on it very early on, and I scribbled a little note down. It's about drivers having their head in the game. I'm going to show you a little bit of video in a moment. It's fictional. It's something we produced ourselves, but there's kind of an assumption that every driver is absolutely on top of their game. They're paying full attention. They haven't got other things going on in their life which are affecting their behaviours. We assume that their vehicle is entirely roadworthy, etc., etc. And we just tried to shine a bit of a light on this with this little bit of video. Now, we'll apologise slightly ahead of it. We did it all in hand, and I have a very talented colleague in Manchester who pulled all this together, but he does fancy himself as a little bit of an impersonator, so I will apologise for a few of the accents before we get into this. But let me know what you think.
Colin, 62, over 40 years driving everything from box vans, to HGVs, right across Europe.
There's no kind way to put this. Colin is disengaged, bored and clinically obese. In his mind, he's the best HGV driver on the road, by a country mile. Colin can be best described as lethargic.
Alright, I'm Ben. I'm 18. I'm currently living at home with me mum, but mostly I'm in the gym or out with me mates.
Ben, an apprentice fitter, only passed his driving test a couple of months ago and hasn't driven much since. Keen to impress his new boss, he's volunteered to deliver some parts to a colleague on site, in his mum's car, without her knowing. Ben's mood is nervous.
Hi, I'm Gina. I live at home with my cat Lilo. When I'm not working, I'm usually at kickboxing club or working on my side hustle.
Gina's driving skill is good. She travels up and down the country constantly. She's highly motivated and is working her way up through the business. Gina's had a number of hands-free conference calls already today on her work phone. Her primary focus is work. Gina can be described as overconfident.
Hello, my name is Nimal. I am 35 years old. When I was younger, I used to play hockey and cricket.
Nimal works alone, often driving for more than 10 hours a day. He only gets paid when he delivers on time. He's recently split from his partner and is currently sleeping on his brother's sofa. He's in a very dark place mentally. Nimal is depressed and agitated.
Hey, my name is Boba. I'm 40 years young. I don't have much time for hobbies. I like working and making money.
Slobodan first came to the UK 11 years ago to earn better money than he could back home. His hard work has paid off, and he's a supervisor and facilities management technician for a logistics company. There's a generous performance bonus, but the targets are stretching. Slobodan always exceeds the targets. He's a million miles an hour kind of guy. Slobodan's mood is impatient.
I'm looking silly tonight.
Blimey, motorways are intense. I hope my mum doesn't spot the car's gone.
There's a big fat bonus heading my way.
I hate this job. I hate my life.
Come on, get out of the way. I've got places I need to be.
Motorways are intense.
Out of the way.
I hate this job.
Places I need to be.
I hate my life.
Yes, you join me now on the bridge just above what can only be described as an horrific crash, which the emergency services are saying is one of the worst they've seen in a very long time. I am currently stood above the motorway, which is closed, with a 5-mile tieback in both directions, and that's to allow the air ambulance to land. I can see at least 5 vehicles which have been moved to the hard shoulder, and the emergency services are seeing to the people involved. Sadly, despite perfect weather conditions today, this incident just goes to show that on any road, any day, at any moment, such an accident can happen. Julie Maddox reporting for Radio DFBB. It's back to you in the studio.
Nimal walked away from the incident with no injuries, but his vehicle was damaged, leaving him with no way to do his job. He parted company with the employer. Nimal has a new role in a warehouse for a supportive employer, where he's taking advantage of their welfare service to help with his mental well-being. Colin suffered some minor physical injuries, but he was deeply affected by the amount of damage his truck did to other vehicles. He struggled to sleep and was ultimately diagnosed with sleep apnea, forcing him to surrender his license on medical grounds. His employer has found him an off-road role. His recovery is ongoing. The incident left Gina with light injuries, resulting in a couple of weeks off work. Caught by dashcam evidence to be using a mobile phone at the time of the collision, she received 6 points and a driving ban due to totting up. Gina is still working for the vending machine company and hopes to be back on the road once her ban is served. Ben wasn't physically hurt in the incident, but his mum's car was a write-off. He got 6 points on his license when it became clear he didn't have permission to use the car, or insurance. As a new driver, that was enough for him to lose his licence, and consequently his apprenticeship too. He's currently working as a barista in his local coffee shop. Slobodan suffered life-changing injuries in the incident. Unsecured equipment in the back of his van struck his neck and shoulder, causing an 80% loss of motor skills on his entire left side. Despite ongoing rehabilitation, he's been medically retired by his company, and it's likely he will struggle to make ends meet going forward. Police investigations are ongoing, and they are interviewing both the drivers and their employers as they seek to understand what happened and who might be to blame. What do you think? As a leader, a policymaker, a fleet manager, a colleague, or as a friend, who will you influence? Be the change. It's personal. All of us have the power to affect change, whether it's to lead, enforce, advise, prescribe, act or show, whether we make vehicles safer, drivers better, or by allowing drivers to concentrate on the task at hand. We must be the change.
Okay, I don't know what you thought. I mean, we produced that for a different audience, to be honest. We produced that for the industry that I come from, the freight operators, the fleet operators, to really just shine a light on the fact that they do have massive powers of influence, not just over their own fleet, but also within their supply chain. But we all have influence. We all have people that we know. We all have friends and families. Some of us are within organisations, our colleagues from the local authorities, our police colleagues, where you have big supply chains, you have big footprint. People will come along. And one of the real messages that we're trying to get across with this whole piece of video, and Kira put it perfectly earlier, it's personal. We'll talk every day about 5 people typically dying on our roads, 50 or 60 being seriously injured, often with life-changing injuries preventing return to work. Something that struck me literally just a few days ago, I woke up and turned the news on the radio and heard about another sad, tragic mass shooting in the States with 7 or 8 people killed. I wonder if they were waking up and hearing that 5 or 6 people had died on our roads overnight. Puts it into context a bit. We wouldn't accept it anywhere else, would we? I mean, it's unacceptable. And they're not statistics. That's a still from a brilliant Australian road safety advert, if you've seen it, where a guy's asked how many people he basically thinks it's acceptable to die on the roads of, I can't remember which Australian state it is, forgive me, but, you know, acceptable to die on the roads of Queensland in 12 months. And he said, oh, well, 40. At which time 40 of his friends, families and mates all walk around the corner. It's a bit different when it's people you know, isn't it? But everybody knows them. They're not statistics. They're somebody's mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, your mate at work, the fella down the pub, etc. And this was our slogan for the event that we put on fairly recently, but we're driving this out as a whole campaign because the reality of it is we can do something about it. I've mentioned to the industry that I come from, and genuinely there is such a level of enthusiasm and inspiration within that industry to actually be doing something about this. There are lots of brilliantly run fleets out there, and that's great, but it's actually now persuading and encouraging, and we're seeing signs of this, of getting organisations to start throwing their weight around across their supply chain. All of these vehicles that we see on the road that, you know, are poor behaviours, they're not out there just for the fun of it. An awful lot of them, we'll cover this off in a second or two, but they're out there working. And there's another word we were talking about, about people who drive for work, whether it's company car drivers, the grey fleet drivers, the weird and wonderful world of grey fleet drivers, even the gig economy, to look back at the last presentation, van and truck drivers. There's another word to describe those people, by and large. They're employees. And you wouldn't accept that kind of behaviour in your workspace. We'd be saying something here today if, you know, people have started nodding off at the table or started having a quick look on their phone at various bits and pieces on their phone, or just general unsociable behaviour in here. But somehow we tend to turn a little bit of a blind eye to it when it's out on the road. And I'm going to use the word again, unacceptable. So it's not just for fleet operators about the way that they run their own fleets. It's about the way that they influence others. And this driving change motive is what we've been using, and rather brilliantly talking to Jem, we found we'd settled on the same phrase, so we'll share that one at the moment. I wanted to get my puzzled slide up. I googled puzzled look. That wasn't the first image that came up, but that was the best image that came up. And it's something that baffles me, genuinely baffles me, and terrifies me in probably equal amounts. The number of organisations I deal with and come across both in this life and my previous life, where their health and safety processes, their structures, their attitude to health and safety is terrifically robust. Their factories, their offices, their construction sites, their production facilities are tremendously health and safety robust. I got asked to go and serve on a meeting of the Parcel Carriers Safety Association more than a few months ago now. Who would have thought such a thing existed, eh? The Parcel Carriers Safety Association. And off I went, and it was an odd meeting, and I'll share this with you because I think you'll get this. Is in the world I live, most of the meetings that I go to, it's about 80% of the same people who at the last meeting are there, and 80% of the people will be at the next meeting. And I walked into this meeting, and the only person I knew was the guy who'd invited me. I knew all the organisations because it was your DPDs and your Yodels and your DHLs and your Everys and all the rest of it, but not the people. And I sat in a meeting full of health and safety risk check managers for an entire day, which was an experience. I was taking one for the team. And we got to the end of the day, and the chairman, and uncharacteristically for me, I managed to keep my mouth shut through most of the day. The guy who was chairing it said, "Well, what do you think, Mark? Any observations?" And I said, "Yeah, I got one. Don't you guys ever have any issues involving your vehicles? You're running thousands of vans and trucks. We haven't talked about vehicles at all today. I've heard about people scalding their fingers on cups of coffee, which were a bit too hot coming out the vending machine, people falling downstairs, whole new and inventive ways of cutting off bits of your anatomy and sortation hubs. Not a single peep about your vehicles." To their credit, a couple of the guys and girls sat there and goes, "Yeah, that's a point." I went back the next time around, 3 months' time, they started talking about it. And every month, every 3 weeks, 3 months I go back, it gets a little bit better. They're not there yet, but at least they're starting to talk about it. And that's the puzzle for me. And the reason it's even more puzzling than my puzzled look is the law's really clear. The law exists. You know, of course we want people to abide with road transport legislation. Of course we do. Road traffic legislation. Health and safety at work. The Health and Safety at Work Act is really, really clear. It's about your obligation, your duties, your responsibilities, call them what you will, to create a safe working environment. The road is a safe working environment, is a working environment as far as we're concerned. It's also equally explicit about your requirements to extend that chain of responsibility down into your supply chain. Just say, no, it's nothing to do with me, it's one of our contractors, nothing to do with me. So we're doing a hell of a lot of work at the moment on something we're calling the power of procurement, which is a lousy name for a title. And Frankie Goes to Hollywood, we're back on the telly the weekend with the power of procurement, so that's all good. But it's there, it's in black and white. There's no reason why it shouldn't be the case. I can only talk about national highways. We wouldn't employ somebody to come and build a big bridge for us or build a nice big bit of road for us and all the rest of it unless we were pretty sure they knew how to do that without killing people. It's not that long ago where planners almost built in a level of fertility, that's an interesting concept, a level of fatality on road projects. Absolutely unacceptable. So it's really, really clear. You know, we're not there with it, but we're trying to get there, and we're trying to throw our weight around and our influence across our supply chain and also to encourage other people's supply chains to join the cause. And the reason for that is very, very straightforward, because if you look back at this road, and that was what we're trying to get across with this video, is so many of the vehicles out there are being driven for work. We can influence them. We had this daft idea a while ago. I have to say there were a couple of beers involved when we were at a conference, but, you know, if we suddenly inherited the superhero power of freezing a mile of motorway, a mile of nice busy motorway, and then we went down there and we knocked on all of the windows of the vehicles and said, "What are you doing here today?" How many of them are there because they're driving for work? And that's before we even start thinking about commuters and all the rest of it. How many are there because they're driving for some kind of work purpose? Now, we had a few problems with that plan. We're pretty good at freezing miles of motorway, as I think most of you know. We couldn't get the health and safety sign off to go down there and start knocking on people's windows, so we gave up on that one. But let's think of it another way. Our plan B. And the arithmetic's slightly fudged here, because I've already mentioned I'm not the sharpest tool in the box, but we know there's about 500,000 trucks on the road. With the exception of the odd Brighton-based ex-boxer, they're being driven for work. No other reason to have them. There's more than 4.5 million vans on the road. There's about 4.8 million at the moment, but let's call it 4.5 million, keep the arithmetic easy. 4.5 million vans on the road, so that's 5 million vehicles which must be being driven for work primarily, so there's an influence trail there. There's about 1 million company cars. It's a figure that's dwindling, but let's call it 1 million, keep the arithmetic easy. There's 6 million vehicles. And then we get into the weird and wonderful alternate universe of grey fleet and salary sacrifice vehicles. Dependent on which report you read, there's anywhere between 22 and 14 million of them, which does seem a fair degree of tolerance to me. But anyway, let's take advantage of that and go for 14 million. I now know, you now know, that there's 20 million vehicles on our road, which we ought to be able to influence behaviours, vehicle choice, to come back to Dr. Priestley's presentation on the Android and all the rest of it. We ought to be able to influence vehicle choices, behavioural choices, etc., etc. Because, coming back to what I said earlier, they're not a special breed, they're employees. We can influence their behaviours. 20 million vehicles, rather handily, is about half of all the vehicles registered in the UK. So it's not the perfect answer, but getting stuck into those half of our vehicles on our road, that's not a bad start. And if you look at our high-risk routes, motorways, etc., the A roads where, you know, we have a degree of a remit in there. I bet if we went down to the M1 now and looked at the vehicles going past, I bet there'd be a damn sight more than 50% of them out there being driven for work. So the opportunity and the potential is massive to influence through this manner, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Oh, I've done the arithmetic bit. Sorry, I'm a slide behind with that one. Okay. Let's move on a little bit. God, that's my influencing slide. That's almost as good as the board impression one, isn't it? That one, the puzzled impression. But we can do it, and the call to action of this, and as I say, we've used this on many occasions now within the fleet industry, and we're starting to get traction with this. But the opportunity is there for us to influence, for the people in this room. We've got a lot of people, a lot of influence in this room. You know, if I was talking to a room full of fleet managers, which is what I tend to end up doing because they're the people that come along, and I know we're preaching to the converted with those kind of people. But the clarion call is to manage your own fleets. Manage them well, manage them brilliantly. Get engaged with other people in your organisation, have a responsibility, or to be more correct, they're probably shirking their responsibility for their grey fleets. Get those guys and girls involved. Engage with your procurement team. We've got a massive exercise going on at the moment in highways, which won't see the light of day till about this time next year, but actually being really prescriptive in our procurement processes of our expectations of our own supply chain. This is what we're expecting you to do. Sign up for it. Get involved. There are elements in there about, you know, being part of recognised accreditation programmes, getting their own checks set up, all sorts of stuff in there. But basically, it's been very, very, very clear about our expectations. And forgive me for putting it this way, having been very clear about our expectations, it also gives us quite a big stick to start bashing them with when they are falling down on the job for us. And the intention is to spread that message across government departments, across public sector, before we start trying to influence within supply chains. Engage with your health and safety people. I was chatting over lunch with some colleagues from some of the regional safety partnerships, for example. They're part of local authorities. They're engaged with local authorities. So are your local authorities who have a significant supply chain, I'll just use this as an example, but are you being very explicit of your expectations of your supply chain? You know, there's no excuse. Quick anecdote that I'll throw in, because it just makes me smile every time I talk about this one. A fleet director at a pretty big fleet in the UK, one of the biggest in the UK, very well run fleet, is a mate of mine. He rang me up a few months ago now, basically to have a whinge, I think. He was on his way into his office for the first time for months because of the, you know, the COVID restrictions and working from home and all the rest of it. So he's taken himself in there, and he managed to get himself cut up by a van from a fairly large facilities management company. So he tooted his horn at him just to let him know of his displeasure and just remind him of the fact that he was there and would you mind not driving into me. At which stage he got the full set of hand signals and brake checked 3 times. That's Fair enough. Where's the punchline? The punchline was, imagine your man's surprise when my mate reversed into the parking space next to him at the facilities where he'd actually come in to do some facilities management work. They no longer have the contract. And that's the power that we have. Be clear in your expectations and be prepared to follow it through. They wouldn't have employed this facilities management company if they weren't pretty sure they know how to play with electricity without blowing themselves up. Why should we accept the fact that they behave like a Neanderthal out on the road? Not acceptable. So, we're here to help. As I mentioned, I have two hats, both the National Highways Commercial Vehicle Incident Prevention Team. I manage a team of project managers. We're the very definition of herding cats, I think, but I manage a team of project managers. We're always looking for projects, interventions, things that we can put out there to support all of you, all of us, fleet managers, anybody that we can influence to do the job properly and to do it to not just legal minimum standards, but to meet best practice. With my DFBB hat on, that's very much a communications channel. We have loads and loads of resources available to anybody that will find them useful. Everything that we do is FOC because the taxpayer has already rather kindly paid for it for us. So please take advantage of it. I'll put some URLs up on the final slide for DFBB and our driving change info, but we're here to help. I can't step down with us quickly mentioning something, because we've talked about mobile phones a lot and we've talked about cameras and all this kind of stuff. One of the projects that my team are trying to pull together at the moment is a project called Ping, which is a lousy name for a project. Ping is all about trying to let operators, fleet operators, cars, vans, trucks, whatever, know what we're spotting their vehicles up to when they're round the corner and out of sight. We have quite an array of equipment on our network which can give us an indication. We've talked about the mobile phone stuff earlier with some of our future compliance technology, which is pretty decent at spotting handheld mobile phone use and non-seatbelt wearing. All Ping is about is when the kit isn't being used for enforcement. If it's being used for enforcement, the gloves are off. But when it's not being used for enforcement, we'll let you know with the view that you sort it out. And if you think Ping is a bad name for a project, it was originally called Project CISO, and I mention this because I think it'll just sum up what it's about in one fell swoop. We couldn't call it Project CISO after I had to admit to one of our comms team what CISO actually stood for. Now, here's the audience participation bit, guys. You can have the pre-watershed version of CISO or the post-watershed version of CISO. Hands up for pre-watershed? Yeah, I figured. Post-watershed? Yeah, sort your shit out. So it's all about us letting people know what's going on out there. There's a lot of, I'm trying to think of a better word than goodwill, but I can't, but there's an awful lot of goodwill, there's an awful lot of motivation in the fleet industries where I come from to be doing the right kind of thing and to galvanise that momentum into their supply chains and their suppliers as well. So forgive me, I don't know if that was probably not the kind of presentation you're expecting. I know it's a bit different from the other ones we've had today, but we're here to try and help, we're here to try and support, and to be honest, we're here to try and make stuff happen. So thanks for your time, guys.